Hello, I'm Andrew Webster. This is number 0846, the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder, and it comes to you right now.
The following program is brought to you in living color.
Now, it's time for an eclectic mix of interviews and some of the oddest news stories you'll ever hear. It's the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder.
Hey there, hi there, ho there! Peter Anthony Holder here with you, and yes, this is indeed another edition of the Stuff File program, number 0846. And coming up on this edition of the Stuff File program, you'll meet John Roberts, who is the co-owner of Muttley's Estate, a New Zealand company that makes wine for pets. How did the company start?
We saw locally there were some dog beer companies that were starting to launch. They were primarily for a bone broth base, but we noticed that their shelf stability wasn't as long as we figured we might be able to do. And New Zealand's got such a large and amazing wine culture that we thought, hey, why not have a pet wine? It just seemed like the perfect little combination.
Gilles is one of the recipients of the Psychology Prize at this year's Ig Nobel Awards. They investigated what happens when you tell narcissists or anyone else that they're intelligent.
I think one of the key implications for this research is about the amount of overpraise. Grade inflation is something people talk about in academics. Marks are going up and students don't have to do as much for those marks. And they get praise and children can get praise. Everyone's got to be a winner. And there's a potential, based on our research, if you keep telling people that they're better than they really are, that they're better than they merit to be told, that you might actually have an influence on their narcissism levels.
Jeffery Haskell is the author of the sci-fi novel Against All Odds. What's the story about?
The basic story is a situation that I ran into a lot when I was in the military, which is you could do everything right and it could still be your fault that it went wrong. And that is the basic premise is a story of redemption where the main character, Jacob, he does everything right in a combat situation in space. He makes all the right decisions. He saves lives, but it still goes wrong and he's blamed. And then he's got to spend the rest of his career trying to make up for that.
And there's lots and lots of Stuff File news, dad joke theater, morning shower thought, and, of course, an idiot of the day. The guest later, the person who told you this was show number 0846, was Andrew Webster, the owner of Pubnix Inc., a boutique internet service provider with great personalized service. It's the place that the Stuff File program's website has been powered by for over 15 years. Thank you very much, Andrew, for doing the guest slate on this edition of the Stuff File program, a show that is listener-supported, fan-funded radio that depends on you for our success. Join us at patreon.com to help make this show an even bigger and better radio experience. Well, let's get right to the stuff. Sam O'Hara filed a federal lawsuit against Washington, D.C., claiming police violated his constitutional rights by detaining him for playing the Imperial March from Star Wars while following Ohio National Guard troops. The 35-year-old artist was handcuffed for 15 to 20 minutes on September 11th before being released without charges. O'Hara said, "It feels surreal and dystopian, and I feel like I'm living in a Star Wars episode or movie, and this is like an invading dark force." His ACLU-backed lawsuit seeks damages against 4 police officers and 1 Guard member for alleged First and Fourth Amendment violations. The case stems from President Donald Trump's deployment of over 2,300 National Guard troops from 8 states to patrol Washington. Well, the Imperial March is kinda appropriate.
You don't know the power of the dark side.
The French National Postal Service, La Poste, released nearly 600,000 stamps celebrating the emblem of French gastronomy, the croissant. And these stamps aren't just ones you'll lick and stick. They smell like a butter croissant. They're popular, too, said Anthony Richet, director of the Valence Post Office. I had a stock of 1,000 stamps available, and on the first day, more than 400 stamps were already gone. Good for international mail, they come with a souvenir print and cost €210, that's about $2.44 US, €1 more than the average cost of an actual croissant. I wonder how many calories are in one stamp. Reba Wilson faces multiple charges after allegedly firing at HVAC technician Nate Baird when he requested a $70 diagnostic fee for her dryer repair. Wilson refused payment, claiming warranty coverage, then pointed a gun at Baird and said, "You're going to fix my dryer." According to Baird, Wilson said, "I don't want to pay that." Baird replied, "Well, I don't work for free." He pretended to work on the appliance before escaping through the back door as Wilson fired a shot and yelled, "I'll pop a cap in your ass." Police discovered a shell casing on the dryer and a gun under Wilson's couch. She appeared in court on charges including criminal recklessness, intimidation, criminal confinement, pointing a firearm, and being a serious violent felon in possession of a weapon. Oh, so she has a record already. Well, here's hoping that when she's back in prison, she's on laundry duty. You know, I'm old enough to remember when dryer repairmen didn't get shot at. The worst thing they dealt with back in the day was just being lonely.
It's not often that anybody needs us, Maytag repairmen. That's why we're the loneliest guys in town.
A woman is seeking $50,000 from SeaWorld Orlando after a duck struck her in the face while riding the Mako roller coaster in March, causing her to lose consciousness. The attorneys argue SeaWorld failed to warn guests about dangerous conditions and created a zone of danger for bird strikes due to placing the roller coaster over or near a body of water, which creates a higher risk for bird strikes involving ducks, gulls, geese, and other waterfowl. The lawsuit claims the Mako coaster disorients birds and increases collision risks. SeaWorld typically doesn't comment on pending litigation, but has previously stated guest safety is a top priority. While Mako has faced lawsuits involving flying objects before, this appears to be the first duck-related incident. The incident wasn't included in the park's quarterly injury report, and the duck's condition remains unknown. $50,000 seems like a small number for litigation. I guess the woman already has some kind of insurance policy. Also, it's interesting how no one seems to know how the duck is doing. Anyway, let's get to our first guest here at this edition of the Stuff File program, shall we? If you're having a special occasion that requires a libation, it's now savvy to include your pets. That's where Muttley's Estate comes in. They offer pet-friendly, non-alcoholic wines for cats and dogs using catnip as a main ingredient to boost the moods of furry friends. John Roberts is the co-founder and director of Muttley's Estate, and he joins us from New Zealand via Riverside.com. Hi, John.
Hi, Peter. How are you?
Yes, tickety-boo. Thanks very much for being on the program with us. How did this idea come up in the first place? I understand that you and your wife are the co-founders of this company. How did this come up?
We saw locally there were some dog bear companies that were starting to launch. They were primarily for a bone broth base, but we noticed that their shelf stability wasn't as long as we figured we might be able to do. And New Zealand's got such a large and amazing wine culture that we thought, hey, why not have a pet wine? It just seemed like the perfect little combination.
Obviously, you are a wine connoisseur, and I would assume that you and your wife are pet people as well.
Yes, we're definitely pet people. Both grew up with dogs. My family own a veterinary pharmaceutical company in New Zealand, so we've always had pets around us. At one stage I think we had 8 cats. Unfortunately, being a pharmaceutical company for vets, some locals thought that we were actually a vet clinic and would end up dumping their pets at our warehouses. So, being a soft family, we ended up taking them on as family pets.
What was your daytime job in the first place before you started this company?
Veterinary pharmaceutical sales.
And your wife was also in pharmaceutical sales or a different job?
No, my wife was actually in international tourism management. Yeah, she's got an amazing skill in marketing, so it just worked so perfectly. I had the sales skills and the contacts and the manufacturing abilities, and she had the marketing nous to basically bring it to life.
Now, did the two of you keep your old jobs, or did you just jump in uh, with, into the deep end with both feet with this particular new venture, Muttley's Estate?
Luckily, we were able to keep our existing jobs. So, yeah, with my wife being focused on marketing and myself being in veterinary pharmaceuticals, luckily, Muttley's Estate pet range fits within the product portfolio of the larger group of family companies. Yeah, so we were definitely lucky in that respect.
Now, I'm not familiar with wines for pets. Has this something that's been around for a long period of time, or are you one of the innovators of it?
We're one of, I believe there might be one or two other companies that have recently started up. They use a different formulation to us. So we're primarily focused on the catnip, primarily because of the health benefits that catnip actually has for cats and dogs. So catnip, as is commonly known in cats, it's a mood enhancement, so it makes them playful and happy, which is perfect for older cats that you need to get moving. But in dogs, catnip actually works the complete opposite, so it helps them to relax. So it's good for stressful situations like moving, firework displays, all of that.
You mentioned that your competition, they're relatively new as far as startups are concerned. So basically, this is a whole new industry.
Yeah, we believe so.
And how did you come up with the idea itself?
In terms of the idea, we knew that we wanted to try and launch a pet treat. We saw the basically humanization of pets through the COVID period. So people started attributing more human-like behaviors towards their pets. So buying human-branded pet clothes, trying to feed them slightly differently. So we knew that there was that global shift towards the humanization of pets. So this product range fitted in perfectly. The name Muttley's Estate actually comes from my childhood dog. So my childhood dog was Muttley. So that's where the name comes from. But then with the actual introduction of the products and the manufacturing methods, we spent quite a bit of time playing with the formula to make sure that it was safe for animals and that it actually had the intended desired effects of the catnip. And then, yeah, my wife went off and started having a play around with the branding and the different names, and yeah, it's a fun product. It's a fun company to be a part of.
Well, speaking of some of the different names, what are the different names? Because I've checked your website out, and there's pretty funny. But what are some of the names, and how did you come up with them?
My wife and I like puns, so the names are all based off of human wines. So we've got a Pinot Noir, we've got a Champagne, we've got Port, which is P-A-W-T, Cabernet, Sauvignon Blanc, Prosecco. Yeah, we had a lot of fun actually creating those names.
I would also assume that in the R&D part of putting this business together, you tested probably some of these things out on your own pets?
Yeah, definitely. We tested it on not only our pets, we also did smaller trial runs. So we had tasting events, making sure that everything was working to its desired effect. That was also part of our further tasting events were part of our launch. So yeah, it has been trialed on a number of pets prior to actually launching, just so that we can make sure it's safe. But having that veterinary pharmaceutical background, I knew that when we were going into the trial that the formulation was safe anyway. It was just the trials were primarily for palatability, just to make sure that the pets actually like the taste. Cats can be a little bit picky. The cats seem to like the white wine variety more than the red wines. They also like the stronger ones, like the Prosecco and the Port. But the dogs, they just love anything. They'll roll around in the bowl of pet wine.
When did you first start doing this as far as a company is concerned? And by that I mean, when did you first start selling Muttley's Estate wines?
We first did a soft launch maybe 8 to 10 months ago. We've been in the market properly for about 6 to 7 months now, having good traction. So we're in over 50 retailers in New Zealand, and we've just recently launched in Melbourne in Australia. We're also looking for distributors worldwide. We're just having so much interest in the product that we're just trying to find the right partners to join up with.
Were you at all surprised with the interest that you might have had in other places?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we've had inquiries from Latvia, so many different places, and it's been really cool to see how such a fun product concept and such a fun business could be so beneficial to so many different countries and so many different types of pets.
I got to tell you, one of the places I heard about this company, Muttley's Estate, was on a late night American television show.
Really?
Yeah.
That's awesome. I did not know that.
So there you go. That's where I first heard it, and I thought, okay, I've got to find the website, and I've got to find somebody to talk about this.
Yeah, it went viral, and we've been struggling to keep up with how many different news medias have actually picked it up. I know that it went viral in Thailand, so we were posted on one of the main primary media sources in Thailand. So we had so many inquiries coming in from there. Yeah, it just seems to have snowballed, which is really amazing to be a part of, and we're so thankful for it.
Now, I know that you're not supposed to give wine to animals, our current wine, but your wines, can adults drink them?
Yeah, I mean, you can. It doesn't have a food safety certification just because it's manufactured for pets, but catnip as a herb is with the same family as mint, so it is safe for humans to drink. When humans actually drink it, it tastes a little bit like a chamomile tea, like a cold chamomile tea. Yeah, it's actually not bad.
So you've tasted them yourself?
Yeah. Always got to trial it to make sure. It's a lot nicer than some of the other ideas that we came up with in the early days. But yeah, we're really happy with how the taste profile actually came out.
Now, we're in North America, and you mentioned the fact that you are currently distributing it in all of New Zealand and in Australia, and that there's a possibility that it can come elsewhere and be worldwide. Do you have any idea of when that will be?
Hopefully as soon as possible. We're reaching out to a number of different distributors. We're working with New Zealand Trade and Enterprise as well. So they're a local government body that helps New Zealand companies to actually export their products. So they have been amazing. We're working with them to try and find distribution partners. But if any of your listeners are part of a pet health distribution, then feel free to reach out to us. We're looking for partners.
And by the way, I understand your website is muttleyestate.com, so I would assume that when you have a more robust distribution that you will announce it there?
Yes, 100%, and also on social media as well.
John, thank you very, very much for taking the time to be on the program with us.
Thank you. I appreciate it so much.
John Roberts, the founder and director of Muttley's Estate, the New Zealand makers of wine for pets. You can go to our website at thestuffile.com, check out the show number for this program, which is show number 0846, and you'll find the link to their website. You're listening to the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder.
And now, Dad Joke Theater.
If I had two puppies, I would name them Rolex and Timex. That way, I'd have 2 watchdogs.
Join us again for another Stuff File program, Dad Joke Theater.
There's still more guests, more news, and an idiot of the day coming your way on the Stuff File program. Stay tuned. The Stuff File program is a listener-supported, fan-funded radio show that depends on you for our success. Join us at patreon.com to help make this show an even bigger and better radio experience. Sign up and find out about our rewards program. Being a patron doesn't have to be a long-term commitment. There's absolutely no obligation. You could join today and end whenever you'd like. But the time we have your support would be so greatly appreciated. We'd also love to hear your thoughts about the show and even your ideas for rewards. Join us for the ride. Join us at patreon.com/The Stuff File program.
I'm standing with hand on heart. For Canada. Hi, this is Dan Hill. I grew up in the vinyl album era, so I've always loved reading liner notes. Nowadays, I carry that passion with me every time I go shopping. I read every label. And when the label says Canada, that's music to my ears. Shop as if your country depends on it. Keep your money in Canada for Canada.
You're listening to the Stuff File program. Good times start here. Where they end up depends on how good your legal team is. Here's Peter Anthony Holder.
And still to come in the program, we'll talk to an Ig Nobel Award winner, plus the author of Against All Odds, the sci-fi novel. And we also have a morning shower thought and an idiot of the day, and lots more in Stuff File News right here, right now. 2 75-year-old ginkgo trees at California State Capitol Park in Sacramento are producing a foul odor and safety risks during their fall fruiting season.
Hey, what's that smell?
The female trees release berries containing butyric acid, which creates what Ned Friedman, director of the Arnold Arboretum at Harvard University, describes as the same chemical that dominates the smell of rancid butter and vomit.
It's you!
Jennifer Aida, the spokesperson for Sacramento's Department of General Services, says the fruit creates slip hazards by leaving the slippery flesh of the fruit on the sidewalk, lawn, and on the roadway, creating an unpleasant smell and a potential safety hazard. Officials have installed metal barriers and warning signs around the trees. The stench occurs annually in October and November when mature female ginkgo trees bear fruit. The trees were planted in the 1950s by Governor Goodwin Knight and other state officials. Oh, we may forget the look of a tree or the shape of its leaves,
but we never forget a smell.
The Ocean City, Maryland Police Department put out a social media call for volunteers to help with a training event. A few hours later, they added an update. We've received an overwhelming number of participant sign-ups and are no longer accepting additional volunteers at this time. The Post had explained how volunteers would be helping train officers in their Green Lab, looking for 12 to 14 volunteers 21 years of age and up to smoke cannabis for educational purposes, while officers learn to recognize cannabis impairment. Participants would bring in their own weed and consume it during the 4-hour training, while officers observed their changes in real time. Gee, how were they going to get home?
You are not thinking of driving, are you, my friend? Reconsider. You're in no condition. Ring for a taxi. I'm telling you.
Oh, volunteers were able to use a free shuttle service, and also lunch was provided. Did they actually call it lunch, or was it just munchies?
Trust me, you are high. Way too high.
Melville, Utah resident Alan Giebert bid farewell to his 1991 Geo Metro by crushing it with a massive pumpkin dropped from 14 stories high. The 1,917-pound pumpkin, which won first place at the Utah Giant Pumpkin Festival Way Off, was lifted by crane at Hee Haw Farms in Pleasant Grove before being released onto the compact car. The impact caved in the vehicle's roof in dramatic fashion. Giebert's Metro had stopped running after 35 years of service, prompting him to choose this unique send-off method. Said Giebert, "It's just something that me and my wife have talked about for a long time, that this would be the best way for it to go. And it happened, so it's been kind of fun." Wow. His wife encouraged him to flatten his car with a great pumpkin. She's a lot more understanding than Sally Brown.
I spent the whole night waiting for the great pumpkin. You blockhead! You kept me up all night waiting for the great pumpkin.
And finally, in this section of Stuff File News, before we get to our next guest here in this edition of the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder, police responded in force to Kenwood High School in Baltimore, Maryland. The issue, the artificial intelligence system monitoring school security cameras, said a boy outside the school had a gun in his hand. Takai Allen, the young boy who was sitting outside the school with friends, said, "It was like 8 cop cars that came pulling up for us. At first I didn't know where they were going until they started walking toward me with guns, talking about get on the ground, and I was like, what?" Officers handcuffed and searched Allen, and they figured out I had nothing, he said. What had actually been in his hand? An empty bag of Doritos. After he finished them, he folded up the bag and put it in his pocket. See? A conscientious young man who wasn't willing to litter. Anyway, police had a copy of the photo AI took. It matched the bag. In a statement, police said that they would refer media to Baltimore County Public Schools regarding questions pertaining to OmniAlert, the company that sells the system. A reporter reached out to the company, but it refused comment. Meanwhile, no one in authority seems to be overly concerned about 16-year-old Allen, who had guns drawn on him from 8 squad cars.
In that moment, I didn't feel safe. I didn't feel like the school actually cared about me in that moment because nobody came up to me after, not even the principal.
See, this is just one of the many reasons why I hate Doritos.
Ah, Doritos. Thanks.
No problem. Snuck these out of Tim's locker.
This is bad. Tim loves Doritos.
So, who doesn't?
Hide these! We gotta get out of here before...
It makes people lose their minds. Anyway, let's get to our next guest here in this edition of the Stuff File program, shall we? Last week, we had Mark Abrams on to talk about the Ig Nobel Awards. One of the recipients we talked about was the Psychology Prize, which investigated what happens when you tell narcissists or anyone else that they are intelligent. It was won by a team representing Poland, Australia, and Canada. We have one person who is representing 2 of those countries. Gilles Gignac is a Canadian who lives in Australia. He works at the School of Psychological Science at the University of Western Australia in Perth. He joins us via riverside.com. Hi, Gilles.
Hi, thanks for inviting me on the show.
Thanks for being on the program with us. So how did this whole research come to be?
Well, Marcin is the lead author. He's a professor in Poland. We've been doing research on narcissism and intelligence for several years leading up to this study. And we found correlations between people's narcissism levels and how much they rated their intelligence, even though there's no relationship between narcissism and IQ. So narcissists are neither more intelligent nor less intelligent. They're pretty much just average intelligence. There's a lot of variability, but they do think they're smarter than average. But we wanted to manipulate things in an experimental way because, as people know, correlations, they're interesting, but when you manipulate something in an experiment, you can kind of tease out effects more clearly. And this study was an experiment where we manipulated people's, we believe, their impressions of their own intelligence because we manipulated how their score was presented to them after they did an IQ test. So the impetus, the motivation for this was to do an experiment rather than just a correlation analysis.
When you did this study, how did you get the subjects? I mean, I would assume that you didn't tell them that they were narcissists.
That's right. No one was told that like that. This was really run like a regular study where you recruit people online to participate in a study. These were actually Polish participants, so this was actually conducted in Poland. And so you recruit participants online to do a study on personality and intelligence. So the key part of this study was that everybody did a real genuine IQ test. And they were told this IQ test is a valid IQ test, which it is. The key difference, though, is that for half of the participants, they were put into a group where after they did the IQ test, they were told that they did very well, they scored very high, and their IQ was determined to be above average. Now, that's true irrespective of how they performed. So they were just told that in the randomized group. The other half were told the opposite. They were told, you scored very low, and your IQ is below average. And again, irrespective of how they performed. And what we wanted to see was, does that impact their self-reported narcissism levels after they're told that? And the result was, for one of the dimensions of narcissism, they actually did score different between the two groups, even though they didn't before that manipulation.
Is it difficult, though, to determine that one is a narcissist? Isn't that kind of speculation?
Well, narcissism we treat as a continuum. So, in general discussion in a community, people talk about narcissists and they think it's like a qualitative distinction, like there's at some point you're a narcissist. But researchers think of it as a continuum. Everyone has, some level of narcissism in them, and it's just a question of how much. Now, there is a personality disorder that is officially recognized that is a narcissistic personality disorder, but that's not actually measured with tests or anything. That's really just a qualitative determination on the part of the psychologist or the psychiatrist. And they have their criteria that they go through to determine whether somebody's a narcissist. Now, we didn't actually have that, well, we didn't determine whether we had diagnosed narcissists in our sample. We probably had a couple. But we were looking at narcissism as a continuum, and some people scored high and some people scored low.
When I spoke to Mark, and I've spoken to Mark several times over the years on this show and on my previous show, uh, he is always quick to mention the fact that first it makes you laugh and then it makes you think. So, what is the takeaway of your study? How can we apply it?
Well, I think one of the key implications for this research, and we talk about this in a discussion a bit, is about the amount of, overpraise. Like grade inflation is something people talk about in academics. Marks are going up, and students don't have to do as much for those marks. And they get praise, and children can get praise. Everyone's got to be a winner. And there's a potential, based on our research, if you keep telling people that they're better than they really are, that they're better than they merit to be told, that you might actually have an influence on their narcissism levels, at least in the short term. And the question is, does it have long-term effects? And we don't know that. We didn't measure people's narcissisms, several months later. It was immediately after they were told the result of their test, which wasn't a true result, but, the manipulated one. So I would say that's one key thing to think about.
Well, you mentioned long-term effect, and I'm just wondering, does that involve uh, parenting? Because you have some parents, for instance, who think that the moon revolves around their child, and that child can do no wrong. Does that create a narcissist?
Well, that's part of the experimental results and implications is that it's possible. The results of our study suggest it's possible that you can increase a person's narcissism if you continually praise them above and beyond their actual abilities. I would say the results of our study say that that is a possibility.
Now, you've won the psychology prize at the Ig Nobel Awards, and I understand that you were actually there for the ceremonies. What was it like for you when you first heard word that you won?
Well, Marson sent me an email because he was the lead author on the paper, and he contacted me and he told me that, we're up for a Ig Nobel Prize. I actually told him, "Is this a hoax? Like, are you sure that we are the winners? Because this, we never really thought our research was actually anything unusual or even, remotely funny. I've done papers and research that I think is funnier and would be potentially a candidate for the study. And Marson told me, no, this is not a hoax. I know the person who's contacted us to tell us that we are, eligible for the win. So then we had a conversation with Mark Abrams, and he told us this is actually quite common for the winners to not realize that their research is in any way funny or odd. And he says those are the best winners. So we fit into the category of what they think are their best winners.
So, what were you expecting for the? And I have seen online several of the award ceremonies. Did you happen to see any of the previous award ceremonies, or did you just go in blind? And what were you expecting when you got there?
Yeah, well, I did look at, I have followed the Ig Nobel Prize over the years, not super closely, but definitely check it out. And I did see award ceremonies before on video. I had never been live to an event. Uh, so, my expectations, I think, were largely met because I think the video recordings largely capture what's happening. There is stuff going on behind the scenes, so there is media behind. So one, maybe something that people don't know is the organizers of the Ig Nobel, they really ask us to not tell anybody that we won. Like Marson and I have known about it since January, and the ceremony was only in September. So for all those months, they expect you not to tell anybody. I told my partner, who I brought with me, Eva, to the show, but other than that, I told nobody. So that's a little bit of a quirk with this study. So I'm taking holiday from work, and I'm not even telling my boss why, even though it's a work-related thing to some degree. The event is very, it's quite organized, but it's also quite fluid. It's things are happening that you don't necessarily expect. And there is that classic, yeah, and I was very conscious of this. Your award speech is only supposed to be 1 minute, and we were very conscious of this, so we kind of ran through it because otherwise, a person stands up and says, "You're talking too much. I'm bored. Stop talking. I'm bored." And that did happen a few times in the ceremony, which is a unique characteristic of the Ig Nobel Prize. Probably should also exist in other ceremonies.
Absolutely. Congratulations on your Ig Nobel Award. And as I mentioned, you are originally from Canada. You are from Ontario. How did we lose you to Australia?
I was doing a master's degree in London, Ontario, Western University in psychology. I was happy there, and I was going to be doing a PhD there probably the following year. But I went to a conference and I met a researcher at a conference from Australia, and he told me, "Look, we hung out for a couple of days at the conference. He was a relatively young academic, just kind of starting his own career. So we were, not too much of a difference in age. And we hung out for the conference, and during the conference, he said, "You should come out to Melbourne and do your PhD there. I'll fund you fully. I'll even pay for you to go visit Canada once a year." But come over to Australia and do a PhD. And I thought, why not? What an opportunity, fully paid experience. I did think I was going to move back to Canada afterwards. I had no intentions of living there full time, but basically fell in love with the place. And I started working very shortly after I submitted my PhD, and never went back. And Objectively, I think it's a great place to live.
Well, again, congratulations. Where do you display, if at all, your Ig Nobel Award?
Well, there's one physical prize, and actually Marcin Zajankowski currently has that. He's coming to Australia in December, I believe, and he's supposed to be bringing it over with him. But actually, Marcin has it. I don't know where he has it, but it's probably on the wall somewhere.
Well, thank you very, very much. And again, congratulations for the award. And thank you very, very much for taking the time to be on the program with us.
Oh, thank you. My pleasure.
Gilles Gignac, one of the proud winners of the Psychology Prize of the Ig Nobel Awards. You can find out more by reading their research paper. With their findings, you can go to our website at thestufffile.com to the page for this show, which is show number 0846, and you'll find the links. By the way, Gilles is a proud alumnus of Laurentian University in Sudbury, which is one of the places that plays the Stuff File program via CKLU-FM. You're listening to the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder.
Giving you something to think about. This is Morning Shower Thoughts.
When we yawn, do deaf people think we're screaming?
Morning Shower Thoughts from the Stuff File program.
Got something for the mailbag? Drop Peter a line. He'd love to hear from you. Send your email to mailbag@thestufffile.com. And remember, stuff is spelled S-T-U-P-H. That's mailbag@thestufffile.com. Or catch up with him on Twitter or Facebook. There's more Stuff File coming your way in just a few moments.
Here's a brief word about our show and my book. If you become a regular Patreon patron of the Stuff File program, I'll give you an e-version of my book, Great Conversations, My Interviews with Two Men on the Moon and a Galaxy of Stars. It's easy to do. Just go to patreon.com and become a patron to help make this show an even bigger and better radio experience. So, join Patreon and claim your copy of Great Conversations, My Interviews with Two Men on the Moon and a Galaxy of Stars. Sign up at patreon.com/The Stuff File program.
You're listening to the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder. It's radio that's now gluten-free.
And still to come in the program, we'll talk to the author of Against All Odds. That's a sci-fi novel. We also have an Idiot of the Day coming your way a little later on, and I've got a few more Stuff File news stories to share with you right here, right now. 31-year-old violinist Aaron Thompson faces felony criminal mischief charges after destroying approximately 80 pumpkins valued at $472.14 outside a Tampa Bay area Target store. Security footage captured Thompson at 1:15 a.m. October 21st, picking pumpkins out of the boxes located in front of the store and smashing them on the ground. When arrested days later and shown the surveillance video, Thompson admitted his guilt, stating, "That's me." Thompson told officers he destroyed the pumpkins because someone was messing with him on Facebook and it made him mad. I don't know how those two things are connected, but anyway. Police noted Thompson was unapologetic about his actions, and after smashing the pumpkins, he left the scene to go to sleep. Thompson remains jailed on $5,000 bond and has previous convictions including burglary, battery, and trespass. I don't know how big his violin is, but perhaps we should all get the world's smallest violin just for him. And finally, in this section of Stuff File News, before we get to our next guest here in this edition of the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder, 140 Queensland high school seniors received exemptions from their ancient history exam last week after teachers at 9 schools mistakenly taught Augustus Caesar instead of Julius Caesar. Education Minister John Paul Longbrook discovered the curriculum error just days before the statewide test and granted the exemptions, calling the experience extremely traumatic for students. The Queensland Curriculum and Assessment Authority had notified the state's 180 high schools 2 years ago that the 2025 exam topic would shift from Augustus Caesar to Julius Caesar after 4 years. Said Longbrook, "I'm very unhappy about the situation. He promised that affected students would not be disadvantaged in any way. The exempted students will receive credit based on their remaining coursework, which represents 75% of their annual grade, while the missed exam accounts for 25%.
I come to bury Caesar, not to praise him. The evil that men do lives after them. The good is often interred with their bones. So let it be with Caesar.
Well, you may want to bury him, but you still have to study him. Anyway, let's get to our last guest here in this edition of the Stuff All program, shall we? Award-winning journalist and best-selling author Jeffery H. Haskell has a new military science fiction novel out called Against All Odds. It takes place in the future among heroes and starships. Jeffery joins us from Palm Springs, California, via Riverside.com. Hi, Jeffery.
Hey, how's it going?
Just tickety-boo. Thanks very much for being on the program with us. So you have this science fiction novel, and as I mentioned, it has starships in it. I'm just curious, how much research do you do in something that doesn't exist yet?
That is a terrific question, and the answer is a lot. I have talked to physicists. I've got someone who used to work for NASA on my contact list. I've got a radiation physicist who I talk to a lot named Lisa Richmond. In the book, you run into something called a Richmond field. It's named after her. She helped me come up with it. I own a ton of books about science and space travel and military airplanes and vehicles. So yeah, I do. It isn't uncommon for me to spend hours doing research just to write one scene to make sure I get the science right.
So what comes first as far as you're concerned? Is it the story that comes first, or an aspect of a story, and then you do research to see if that could actually be possible? Or do you talk to these people and then get ideas for what your story is going to be?
The first thing I almost always come up with is the character. Once I come up with like an idea for a character and a situation, that's when I start working on all the science.
So what is the story about in Against All Odds?
Well, the basic story is a situation that I ran into a lot when I was in the military, which is you could do everything right and it could still be your fault that it went wrong. And that is the basic premise, is a story of redemption, where the main character, Jacob, he does everything right in a combat situation in space. He makes all the right decisions. He saves lives, but it still goes wrong and he's blamed. And then he's got to spend the rest of his career trying to make up for that.
Is there anything in your background, not necessarily your military career, but in other people that you've dealt with, where this similar situation played out?
Oh yeah, lots of times. I wasn't in the military for a long time, just 4 years, so I didn't really have a ton of a career. But in my private sector life, there have been a lot of situations where I have watched people do all the right stuff, make all the right decisions, and they still get the hose at the end of the day because it didn't turn out the way people wanted. And sometimes people have to realize that you can make all the right decisions, you can make all the right moves, and everything still goes to heck. And when you're dealing with people who are really powerful, they're never going to want to take the blame. So it's always the lowest man on the totem pole who gets the blame.
I guess the reason why I'm asking is I'm just wondering where the genesis of this story came from. And are you the kind of person who roots for the underdog?
Absolutely. In my heart, I feel like everybody roots for the underdog because we all have been the underdog at one time or another in our life. So we all root for the underdog. And the genesis of the story really came from the idea that I wanted to have a story about a guy that everybody had given up on, but had never really had the chance to shine. And I wanted to grow with him and have the story grow with him as he dug himself out of this hole, and he brought a lot of people with him. I've always loved the stories of, and not just the military ones, but all the stories, like the sports stories, where you have this team of people who suck, but they have potential, and they just need the right catalyst to come together and to be great. And we all want to be great, and that's really where the story came from.
So it's like the Bad News Bears in space,
kind of. I mean, or Run Silent, Run Deep in space, or any Any story or movie that you've ever watched or read where there's a group of people who everybody has given up on, and once they come together and learn to work as a team, they're unstoppable.
Oh, you mentioned Run Silent, Run Deep, one of my favorite films. And I also looked at your bio and I noticed that you're a big Star Trek fan.
Absolutely.
And Run Silent, Run Deep is kind of an episode of Star Trek.
It really is. I love that movie. I watched it a bunch when I was a kid, along with The Hell and Back and pretty much all the World War II movies. I was a big fan of the old, kind of cheesy science fiction like the Seawolf, and of course, Star Trek was just probably the biggest single influence on me of my life.
How did you get into writing in the first place?
I always loved telling stories. I loved the imagination involved of imagining faraway planets and faraway scenarios. When I was in high school, I used to read Tom Clancy's books, and I really loved like the depth and complexity that he would bring to a story with all his different POVs. And so I would write my own stuff. At the time, it was the late 80s, early 90s. There wasn't really fan fiction, but I wrote Star Trek stories, but with my own characters in that Star Trek setting kind of thing. And when I got out of the military, I kept writing, but unfortunately I'm dyslexic and I didn't know it. And so, my stuff was no good because I couldn't spell and I couldn't form a sentence really on paper because I would always get everything backwards. And it wasn't until I was in my 40s that I learned that I was dyslexic, and I was able to kind of figure out how to cope with that. And then my stuff started getting really good really fast.
I also noticed on your website that you say that you think you should always be yourself unless you can be Spider-Man.
Absolutely.
Why Spider-Man?
I learned to read on Amazing Spider-Man comic books, and I have always loved Peter Parker and the fact that he never gives up even when everything has gone to heck around him and he's beaten up and there's people more powerful than him coming after him, but he does not give up ever. And that is kind of my life. I feel like, I always feel like I am up against walls, and it just got to be like Pete and just not give up. No matter how beat up you are, no matter how bad life gets, you just got to keep going.
In your book, Against All Odds, the protagonist is Jacob Grimm. Does he have a bit of Peter Parker in him?
Absolutely. Every character we write, as authors, has got pieces of everybody we have ever read or known in our lives. And, the stubborn refusal to always do the right thing, to not give up in the face of superior odds is definitely right from Pete. And, there's a lot of James T. Kirk in there where he's gonna win no matter what. He's going to change the rules of the game if it means that he'll win.
Is there some of Jeffery in Jacob?
There's a lot of what Jeffery wants to be. Jacob's a very aspirational character. I look at him and I think that's the man I've always wanted to be, and I'm always trying to be that guy. I fail a lot, and as humans do, we can always be better.
You are a Star Trek fan. You've written this science fiction novel. Would you like it to be on either the small or big screen?
Oh yeah, I don't know any authors who don't want their work to be translated on the screen. I think this would make an epic TV show, but I also think it would make a great movie.
Well, again, congratulations on your book. The book is entitled Against All Odds, and it's available everywhere, correct?
Correct. You can get it online at Amazon. You can get an audiobook, and it's also in stores at Barnes & Nobles.
Jeffery, thank you very much for taking the time to be on the program with us.
Hey, my pleasure. I love talking about this stuff, so I'm always happy to speak about books.
Jeffery H. Haskell, author of the science fiction novel Against All Odds. You can go to our website at thestuffile.com, check out the show number for this program, which is show number 0846, and you'll find the link to Jeffery's website, plus links to either Amazon.com or Amazon.ca, where you can order his book directly. You're listening to the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder. Now, boys and girls, it's that moment you've all been waiting for. It's time now for the Idiot of the Day.
And now it's time for the strange things adults do. This Stuff Out presents the Idiot of the Day.
In 2024, Marlena Velez, now 23, a TikTok influencer with over 500,000 followers, was arrested for stealing 16 items worth around $500 from a Target store in Cape Coral, Florida. She was caught when she posted a video of herself choosing the items and putting them in her car. A viewer turned her in, and just 10 days later, Velez was arrested for stealing 16 items worth around $225 from the same Target store. This time she was caught because AI had been trained to alert staff of known shoplifters. She was sentenced to a year of probation. More recently, Cape Coral police spotted her driving and pulled her over as they knew she had an arrest warrant charging she violated her probation. She stopped but sped away when the officer approached her car. Several days later, police saw her riding in someone else's car at night, and that driver pulled over and stayed stopped. The driver claimed Velez wasn't in the car, but an officer found her huddled on the floorboard in the back seat trying to hide. She was pulled out and arrested on 2 warrants, the original plus another for fleeing and eluding police. She is being held without bond. How does she have 500,000 followers online? Probably the same reason people slow down to look at nasty car crashes. Normally I would have a question to ponder here, but this woman has a laundry list of infractions, so I'll just cut to the chase. Marlena Velez, you are an idiot!
Gee, I'm only a kid, but even I know you're an idiot.
And that's it for this edition of the Stuff File program, number 0846. Hope you enjoyed it. The website is thestufffile.com, and once again, stuff is spelled S-T-U-P-H, where you'll find information and links on all of our guests by going to the weekly Stuff File page. Just look for the corresponding program number, and once again, that's 0846. Email me at peter@thestufffile.com. You can also find me on Facebook, Spoutable, Mastodon, and Blue Sky as PA Holder. Check us out on patreon.com, where you can become a patron of the program. Hope to see you back here for our next show on the air, online, or as a download. We're coming to you from everywhere, including kdxradio.com, over the air on World FM in New Zealand, WNRHLP-FM in Newport Richey, Florida, KZZHLP-FM in Eureka, California, CKUW-FM in Winnipeg, CFMU in Hamilton, CKLU in Sudbury, Local 107.3 FM in St. John, CHSR in Fredericton, and also streaming on just about any streaming service your little heart desires. That's it. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder, a presentation of Flying Fish Communications. Please remember that in just 2 days, tomorrow will be yesterday.